Humanity deserves better than to live a life of profound cowardice and constant dread. It is a species with limitless potential and enviable latent abilities, but it is painfully held back from any groundbreaking exploits by this immaterial but overwhelmingly influential emotion called fear. Fear is perhaps the most prevalent human emotion, an expression humanity has perfected. Humans might fumble horrendously at love. They might lack an understanding of happiness. They might find the experience of peace unattainable. They might struggle to explain depression, and many of their expressions and emotions are incoherent and varying across individuals. But not so with fear. Humanity has an uncanny mastery of fear, regardless of the diversity of their experiences or the disparity in their wealth, class, or literacy. Humanity finds common ground in fear. It is a unifying emotion, woven into the very fabric of humanity. The presence of fear is the most trustworthy sign of life in humans. It is their unique heat signature, identifiable in all of them. Some conceal it better than others, but it is nonetheless present in all, pulling the strings of their lives in the background, masked in varying forms as insecurities, anxiety, phobias, worry, and in many cases, anger. Fear is humanity's greatest strength. How could it not be? They exist on a floating spherical lump in the middle of nowhere. They are like sitting ducks, as vulnerable as a peeled grape, naked to all of nature's kink. The human species awakens at dawn with an overwhelming sense of responsibility that it is scandalously ill-equipped to handle. The framework of human existence relies on the willingness of the sun to rise in the morning, the willingness of the rivers, seas, and oceans to respect their banks, the willingness of the volcanoes to tarry within their encasement. It is a common core for an all-concrete species like humanity to be at the mercy of non-living forces that are far out of its realm of control or influence. The very fabric of human relationships are built on the willingness of the other party, for whom they have no real control over nor insight into their thinking. Humans love in the fear of the knowledge that the object of their earnest affections could at any moment change into someone hateful, a transformation they have no control over and no ability to halt or reverse. This pitiable species is tasked with the responsibility of ensuring the continuation of its own existence, a non-trivial task with little room for errors. The average human is fully responsible for their life and could unknowingly end it with a moment of ignorance, indiscipline, or laziness. A routine exercise such as crossing the street requires full concentration, as a lapse in focus could mean a high-speed transportation device could well transport them to their instant death. An ordinary drill such as walking the stairs demands full awareness. For a little negligence, and the stairs could well be repainted with a reddish hue from the cracking of their brain encasements. Humanity daily lives in the fear of death from a series of mundane things. The most basic of human activities is an accident waiting to happen. Sleeping on the bathroom floor during a bath, choking on a sandwich after an overextended bite, setting off a fire while asleep. The list is endless and overwhelming, not to count natural disasters, global pandemics, gun assault, sickness, car crashes, and many other uncontrollable dangers humanity is entrapped with on its planet. This fear grows exponentially depending on the number of people they care about, for they have to live with the knowledge that if not to them, then it could well happen to someone they care deeply for. Beyond the obvious fear of death, humanity has a myriad of fears eating away at the joy of its existence. The fear of losing the love of another is an ever-present cancer in all human thoughts. Humans that seek companionship do so with the dread that one day they could lose it all. The affection of a partner gone with the wind, leaving them incapable of restoring it. The hard-fought trust of a long-term friendship broken in an instant by the most random of squabbles. For humans, it is a terrifying thought to be fully aware of the possibility of every single relationship that means everything to them being vulnerable to failure. The wife, walking out on the husband of many years for new experiences. The child, discontinuing contact with the parents. The best friend, moving on to a new friendship group. Humanity lives in the fear of the fragile thread binding their relationships, a thread that would take decades to weave and seconds to destroy. Another nasty embodiment of human fear is the fear of failure. Humanity is an impressively creative species, putting its boundless intellect to the test in a variety of fields and studies, but simultaneously opening up itself to the fear of creeping. Humans write, sing, design, create, invent, all with the fear of floundering at these things. They live under a self-imposed pressure to constantly produce at their best, for there is no telling when the vibrant singer would lose her soulful voice or the interest of her listeners. No telling when the excellent writer would lose his penmanship or the eyes of his listeners. They wonder if their art is good enough, if their design is creative enough, if they are good enough at their jobs. Humanity lives in the fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of nature, fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of heartbreak, fear of other humans, fear of themselves, fear of tomorrow, fear of death, and some even fear of life itself. Their entire mind is decomposing with a selection of these fears, forcing them into a life, demanding them to be productive, even with the knowledge of this crippling fear and anxiety. This tumultuous experience is the reality of humanity. So naturally, they are geniuses of fear and anxiety, for danger literally surrounds them. Everything they are, have, and want is a health hazard. The greatest of human fantasies is the imagination of the possibility to outsource this fear, the opportunity to confer this cancerous depredation upon another. The fear remains real and tangible, the dangers legitimate and unrelenting, but the consciousness and sensitivity to this indefatigable enemy of humanity is to be bestowed upon another, albeit with the capacity to overcome the fears and eliminate the much dreaded dangers. Humanity fantasizes about this impossible idea of a life free of fear, a life in which danger and safety are one and the same, a life in which a trip to the mouth of the volcano and a 5-star sauna bring about the same relaxation, a life where they can love recklessly and without restraint, where reciprocity neither adds nor deducts from their affection, rendering them void of the fear of rejection, a life of certainty about tomorrow, a sense of inevitability about their future success, happiness and peace, regardless of the path taken in the present. The coming to pass of this ridiculous fantasy would usher in an unprecedented seismic shift in human living. Humanity, free of the burdensome shackles of fear, would exist in a state of utter domination and mastery of all things. In particular, the much elusive unconditional love, unshakable peace, and endless happiness that it has been unfairly robbed of by fear would in an instant be at its fingertips. This improbable fantasy is the reality of a greatly underrated group of seemingly drab humans who live like impetuous hipsters with no sensitivity to the world around them. They are cautious like every other human, yet their safety does not depend on their caution. They work hard like every other human, yet their success does not depend on their labor. They sleep like every other human, yet their refreshment comes not from the night's rest. They eat like every other human, yet their nourishment is not in a piece of bread. They shower like every other human, and yet their neatness is not the work of a bar of soap. They dress up like every other human, and yet their gracefulness is not the product of fine linen. They study like every other human, and yet their wisdom is not in the accuracy of books. They live in houses, but their shelter is not a roof over their head. They inhale air, but their breath is not in the volume of oxygen. These sociopaths share in all the experiences of humanity, but with none of the fears, for their fear is outsourced completely to another. These juvenile delinquents are called Christians. They've outsourced their fears to one whom they call Jesus, extricating them and setting them at liberty to live, thrive, and love, with the assurance of a life in which all things work together for their good, a life in which death is as flattering as life, in which darkness is but an opportunity to shine, a life where they are not afraid to love, to fail, to be rejected, to be hungry, to die, for they are at rest in the confidence of His love and power. They live recklessly, without the fear of wreckage, carefree in the care of God.